You probably spend an embarrassing amount of time replaying old conversations in your head, retreating into the quietest rooms you can find, and wondering why your mind simply refuses to shut off. Society is quick to label these behaviors as anxiety or social dysfunction, but the medical and psychological data paints a different picture. These are not psychological defects. They are empirical, physiological markers of a highly gifted brain. When your hardware is wired for relentless, deep processing, in a world optimized for loud, rapid reactions, the resulting friction forces the brain to adapt. The mind develops 7 distinct, unusual coping mechanisms just to survive the environment. The first adaptation is chronic self-doubt, often labeled as imposter syndrome. The individuals scoring in the absolute highest percentiles of cognitive tests are consistently the most convinced they are totally underqualified. A mind that barely grasps a subject feels confident, but a mind equipped to map every variable, contingency, and unknown sees exactly how much it does not know. The capacity for extreme complex reasoning turns inward, identifying every possible flaw and generating inescapable internal friction. The second symptom is nocturnal isolation. Staying awake until 3 in the morning is rarely poor time management or clinical insomnia. It is a biological drive to bypass the constraints of the standard human circadian rhythm. Daylight hours demand constant, exhausting responses to a noisy environment. The extreme quiet of the night provides a zero-stimulation vacuum where an overheated prefrontal cortex can safely decompress without parsing new data. This leads to the third behavior, verbalized processing. Muttering out loud in an empty room or a parked car carries a social stigma, but neurological research classifies private speech as a highly effective tool for cognitive self-regulation. When a brain manages dozens of multi-layered abstract variables simultaneously, silent thought reaches its limit. Language ceases to be a way to communicate with others and becomes a raw mechanical mechanism used to organize and offload data. Imposter syndrome, late-night waking, and talking to an empty room are not the markers of a deteriorating mind. They are the deliberate, mechanical actions of a system engineering the exact conditions it needs to compute extreme complexity. The fourth adaptation takes this processing power and applies it to the future. Psychological studies show a direct correlation between high verbal intelligence and elevated permanent anxiety. The human brain evolved to detect threats. A highly analytical mind simply performs this task with terrifying efficiency, generating detailed disaster simulations and calculating variables for scenarios most people lack the bandwidth to even imagine. Yet, the same mind running complex predictive models often forgets to reply to a text message or loses track of its keys. This is the fifth symptom, selective amnesia. It is an act of cognitive prioritization. A system operating near maximum capacity must aggressively allocate its resources. It intentionally deletes mundane, low-stakes information to preserve bandwidth for deep, 15-step abstract problem solving. The sixth symptom is a counterintuitive comfort with taboo language. Linguistic research demonstrates that a high rate of profanity actually correlates with higher, not lower, verbal intelligence scores. Cursing is not the result of a limited vocabulary. It is the calculated deployment of a highly specific emotional tool, allowing an analytical mind to condense a complex, multi-layered frustration into a single, efficient, heavily weighted syllable. Finally, the seventh symptom is severe sensory vulnerability. Harsh fluorescent lighting, crowded restaurants, and overlapping conversations trigger a genuine neurological overload. Extroverted brains process stimulus through a short, direct route for rapid reactions. Introverts route information through a longer, complex circuit, looping through memory, planning, and internal dialogue. Dense sensory data causes this exhaustive system to bottleneck, making absolute isolation the only way to restore homeostasis. Extreme anxiety, chronic forgetfulness, and acute sensory exhaustion. These are the physical tolls exacted on a human being operating a high-bandwidth processor in a chaotic, high-noise world. When you aggregate these behaviors, the psychological weight becomes starkly clear. It is deeply exhausting to navigate a society structured entirely for pocket calculators when you are operating a supercomputer. If you recognize these patterns, you are not broken or inherently flawed. You are built for immense depth, trapped in a culture addicted to speed. History consistently proves this. The most enduring, complex contributions to human knowledge rarely come from the loudest voices in the room. They emerge from minds that observe, retreat, and analyze from the periphery. But brilliance demands a heavy toll. Alienation and existential depression are documented costs of this cognitive architecture. Yet, these same neural pathways allow these individuals to experience life with fierce intensity, perceiving layers of meaning and beauty most walk past in ignorance. Most people will ignore this reality. Self-awareness requires a level of discomfort the average person is unwilling to tolerate. But if you are one of the few ready to stop apologizing for how your mind works and embrace the burden of thinking differently, subscribe